Hey everybody, welcome back to Tanner's Books Beyond, and welcome to my final video of 2016, which I'm making in 2017, but it's about stuff that happened in 2016, so this is my December wrap-up video, and even though that month got super busy and hectic, I was able to read 4 books, so I'd say I did pretty well for myself. Unfortunately, I found several of the books I read this past month rather underwhelming. They weren't bad necessarily, they just weren't as good as I hoped they would be. The first book I read was Persuasion by Jane Austen. This is a book about a woman named Anne who several years ago, she was engaged to a guy named Wentworth. They were super in love and they were gonna get married, but then she was persuaded that since Wentworth has like no title and no prospects and no money, she could make a much better match later in life. So she breaks off the engagement, and then fast forward 8 years later, she hasn't been able to find anyone. Wentworth shows back up, he joined the Navy, he got super rich, and now he's like the most famed person who's coming into town, and she's hoping that she can rekindle their relationship, and she finds out that he's still quite bitter that she broke his heart several years ago. I enjoyed most of this book, or rather, I enjoyed the first half and the very end. The first half, you get to see Anne interact with a lot of interesting people from her immediate family and from her brother-in-law's family. They're very interesting characters, and it's fun to see them interact with each other and interact with Anne, and when Wentworth comes into the picture, it's fun seeing them interact with him as well. We get a lot of good development and a lot of good backstory for Anne and Wentworth's relationship, and we even near the end of the first act, we get to see them start to not so much rekindle the romance as start to come together as better friends, at least. And the ending is great because the execution of Anne and Wentworth getting together, and that's not a spoiler, it's Jane Austen, you knew they were going to get together. When they do finally get back together, it is done really well, and I really felt for the couple. The main problem with this book is the second act, which totally makes everything fall apart because it's basically a Pride and Prejudice clone. Like, all of those fun characters from the first act, they're out of the picture for a majority of the book. They don't show up until right at the end, and that's why I like the ending again, is because all the fun people came back. But she's stuck in Bath with just her family, an old friend, Mrs. Smith, who at least is vaguely interesting. But then, like, she gets her own Wickham, but he's not even as effectual an obstacle as the original Wickham from Pride and Prejudice is. Yeah, he starts off seeming charming, and then she finds out that he's actually kind of a dick, but he doesn't even do anything dickish on screen. We don't hear about his stuff happening right now. We're just casually informed that, oh yes, several years ago he was an asshole to us, so he's probably still an asshole now. And she doesn't like rebuke him or anything, she just stops talking to him. It just came off as one big plot cul-de-sac in the form of a poor man's Pride and Prejudice. But like I said, I really enjoyed the ending. I thought it was well done. I thought the romance between Anne and Wentworth was good, and that's kind of what saved this from being 3 stars, like 3.5 or 4 stars even maybe. The next book was Fangirl by Rainbow Rowell, and I'm pretty sure almost everyone on BookTube knows the plot of Fangirl, but if you're not, I'll sum it up for you. Basically, it's about a girl named Kath who is going to her first year at university. She joins a creative writing class. For one of the assignments, she submits some fan fiction because she's like the author of this huge, the greatest fanfic of her fandom of Simon Snow, which is like this universe's version of Harry Potter. So she submits some fan fiction for that, and then the professor pulls her aside and is like, this is actually plagiarism, and you know, fan fiction isn't real writing, so you shouldn't even be writing that at all. This, coupled with a lot of personal family drama going on in the background, starts her to have like a very much an existential crisis and starts her to have a very serious anxiety breakdowns at university. This kind of had the opposite problem of Pride and Prejudice, whereas Pride and Prejudice had a weak second act, this had a fairly weak first act. The main thing about it being that it seems like it's taking forever for the plot to finally get started, and when it does start, all of a sudden you feel like you're in the falling action suddenly, and then once you reach that climax, you realize, wait, no, I'm just finished the first half of the book. This book is split into 2 halves based off the 2 semesters of her school. It really reads more like 2 separate books in one volume than it does a single story, because of the way that everything's structured. And another structural issue I had was that each chapter ends with an excerpt from either one of Kath's fanfics or from the Simon Snow books themselves. And you know, this could be interesting, this could be done well, because they were very important to her in her childhood. She read them and she wrote them during her formative years, and so they really influenced the kind of person she became. But I don't feel like these excerpts were used properly. They weren't used to underline or to symbolize any of the developments that were happening with Kath in the plot. They were just kind of there. I mean, it's already a challenge to try and get people to care about a fandom that literally does not exist, but doing it like this way makes it so much harder and really pulled away from the rest of the story. Fortunately, I feel the second half really saved this book. It brought a lot of the conflicts together and resolved them in really good ways. The family drama and the stuff about Kath's own anxiety and her father's bipolar disorder and the general mental health concerns that the two of them have about each other, I think was handled pretty well. All in all, it's not as good as I hoped it would be, but I still enjoyed reading it. After that, I read Zeros by Chuck Wendig, which which is a hacker-themed techno-thriller sci-fi action drama. There's a lot of genres going on here. This is basically about a team of hackers who are recruited by the government against their will to help hack the United States' enemies and protect the United States government from its enemies as well. And while they're doing all this stuff, I mean, none of them are really happy about it, and they all think it's pretty fishy, but as they start going through their assignments, they realize that there's something seriously way more nefarious at hand than what they initially expected. And it leads to, like, this huge plot drama switch right in the middle. It takes the book from semi-realistic, maybe this could possibly happen, to completely off the walls, crazy, out of this world madness. Now, fortunately, this book does not have a structure problem. In fact, the structure is probably where it excels the best, because this book, as soon as it gets the character introductions done, it hooks you and it runs with it so hard. It was so difficult for me to put this down. I almost didn't go to Christmas dinner because I was reading it so hard. However, it is one of those situations where because you're reading something so hard, you don't really start noticing the issues until you've reached the end. And the main issue for this book, I would say, is that it has way too many characters. You've got your main squad of 5 hackers, then you have like another 3 hackers who are also fairly important to the plot. You also have 3 different government agents that are important to the plot. You have the villain, you have the villain's henchman, and you have many different side characters, all of which get at least one focus chapter because Wendig is trying to give them all depth and he's trying to give them all sympathetic backstories. And you know, it's a noble effort, but I feel with a lot of it, it falls flat. And the biggest place it falls flat, I would say, is with one of the main hackers. All 5 of the main hackers are for different walks of life. So there's like an anarchist, there's a black hat who scams people, there's a hacktivist involved with a lot of revolutionary stuff going on in Syria, there's a guy who's basically a rookie who doesn't even know why he was recruited, and then one of them is just an out-and-out troll. And the problem I have with her, the problem I have with Regan, is that she is a troll in real life as much as she is online, and those kinds of people are not fun to follow. I mean, she's rude, she's crass, she gets in personal space, she says some really insensitive stuff, which, I mean, at least she gets called out about it, but that doesn't make it any less uncomfortable. Plus, it just seems so forced. It's like Wendig is trying to make her this vile, repulsive character, but also trying to keep her just on the edge of charming, and it really doesn't work. Not only is her sympathetic backstory exactly the same as one of the other characters that she interacts with regularly, but it is tried to give development like so near the end, after she spent the entire book just being repulsive and gross and mean to everyone around her. Like I said, it just falls flat so hard. I mean, at least with some of the characters, maybe they don't get as developed as one would hope they are, but you understand them and you understand their motivations and you can sympathize with them. It is so hard to sympathize with Regan because you just don't want to. She's so mean. And it also had an epilogue that I'm gonna pretend didn't happen because it was stupid and pointless and stupid. And then the final book I read for December was Run by Cody Keplinger, and the problem with this book was absolutely nothing. It was perfect. I loved it. It watered my crops, it cleared my skin, it almost made me cry, which I rarely cry at anything, so that's an accomplishment. I have way too much stuff to say about this, mainly just gushing, so I'm gonna make a separate video for my thoughts on it, but in the meantime, I'm just gonna tell you guys that you should definitely read it. It's excellent, it's very heartwarming and lovely, and it was a great way to cap off my reading year on 2016. So that's everything I read for December, and now you're probably wondering what I'm gonna do for January, and the answer is, I think I might actually take a break from most of my reading, at least until Diversathon starts, because Diversathon is gonna take so much out of me that I want to be able to conserve my energy for when I get to the point where I'm reading like possibly 9 or 10 books in the span of 8 days. So we're gonna just relax on that for a bit. Right now I am reading A History of Glitter and Blood by Hannah Moskowitz, and I'm actually doing that as a buddy read with RC from Neck of the Book Lock. It's a shorter book and we're going at it very casually, so I'm not worrying about having to rush through it at any point. So other than that, yeah, I'm gonna just mainly focus on making videos and just bettering myself for January, and then once Diversathon happens and in the following months, I'm gonna kick it into high gear with the reading again. And speaking of videos, I've actually got quite a few that I want to try and get out this week or early next week, so I'm gonna focus on making those. And so until next time, I'm gonna see you all later.